where we're at today. And the story that we've got is the whole crucifixion sequence. But I want to focus on a couple of particular verses and see what we can learn from those. Starting in Mark 15, verse 33. How about that? So this is the story of the crucifixion. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And those standing near him, they didn't really understand, and they thought maybe he was asking for Elijah. And someone ran and they filled a sponge with vinegar and put it on a staff and offered it to him. And he said, let's leave him alone and see if Elijah comes down to help. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, surely this man was the Son of God. I think for each of us, we have a moment in our lives when we realize that Jesus was, in fact, the Son of God. I'll give you guys a second and just think, is there any moment in your life that you can point back to and realize that that is the moment when you realize Jesus truly is who he said he is? For me, that moment was my junior year of high school. And I've told parts or maybe all of this story before, but my grandmother had a heart attack, and I knew it was serious. At first I didn't know what had happened. I was there at a tennis match, and my parents had always come to every tennis match that I had, and they didn't come to this one. And they didn't tell me that they weren't going to be there. And so I played this first match, and then I played the second match that day, and still no parents. And we get home, and my great aunt takes us to her house for a few days, and we had never stayed the night there before. And so I knew that it was serious, and I eventually found out that it was quadruple bypass surgery, and she died on the table, and they kind of brought her back. And it was a long recovery, and during this whole process of her not knowing what's going to happen and whether she's going to make it, that was when I truly decided that Jesus was who he said he was. But over the course of the rest of my life, I had other events that came up that I thought about, do I really still believe that? And a lot of them do. They involve hospital rooms, sitting in there, because you have a lot of time to think in the hospital. And you start to wonder, do you believe? What would happen if, what would happen? Do I really believe what I've been thinking, or what I've been saying, or what I've been doing my whole life? And you just kind of lay there and you look up at the lights, or you wander the halls, or whatever it is that you do while you're there. And you try to figure out what's going on. And in this particular case, I was sitting in a hospital, and lucky for me, I'm never the patient at the hospital in any of my stories, but I was sitting there talking with someone whose grandmother had died. And, in my story, my grandmother survives. But around this same time, in New York, this friend of mine's grandmother died. And that was when she quit believing in God. That was the moment in her life that she could point to when she decided God does not exist. God is not there for me. And maybe you have that moment in your life. But I hope that each of us can think about a time where we realize that God really is who he says he is. Because I think a lot of us, we try to involve God in our lives. We try to live our life differently, I think, because we believe. But my next question for you to think about is, do you really believe what you say? Do you really change your life as a result of what you believe. And the example in Mark 16 is chapter 16, verse 1. These women, they believed. When the Sabbath was over, Mary and Martha, or Mary, Magdalene Mary, the mother of James and Salome, brought spices so that they might anoint the body of Jesus. Do you think they believed that Jesus was God? Maybe? Speak up. Maybe, yes, no.
Yes.
Somebody want to be bold? Okay. So, they were there for this whole crucifixion sequence. They got to see everything. They felt the earthquake. They saw the temple curtain torn. They heard the teaching of Jesus throughout his life. They heard, I think, Jesus saying that he would die and be raised again. He said that, it looks like 6 or 8 times in the gospel. But if we're not sure, maybe they weren't there for each of them, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But Matthew 27:63 says that the accusers, even during this whole sequence of trials and crucifixion, the accusers of Jesus said, "You said you were going to die and be raised again. Do it." They're mocking him, but made it clear that he had promised to come back. So, these women who I think in their minds would have said they believed, why did they come and bring spices to anoint the body that wasn't going to be there? Jesus said he was going to raise from the dead. What are the spices for? Do they really believe? Do we really believe what we say? So then, it gets even maybe worse for these ladies in verse 2. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way. They brought these spices and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" Why does it matter? If Jesus rose from the dead and he's not in there, what does it matter about the stone that's in the way? A lot of times we get in our minds things that are in the way, things that will prevent us from doing something. But if we really had faith to begin with, those things would not even be obstacles because they wouldn't matter. Just like this stone didn't matter. Why? And they put all this effort into gathering these spices to anoint the body that had promised to not be there. Jesus promised there would be no need for stuff like that because he was going to be raised from the dead. His body was not going to smell. It wouldn't need perfume and spices. But they put all this effort after this lifetime, I think, of belief. They put all this effort, and what Jesus said really didn't sink in. So, if we really believe that Jesus was the Son of God, if we really believe that he died, was buried, and raised again, how would our life be different? What would you change? What would you do? Who would you tell? If we really changed our life as a result of Jesus being who he said he was. But I think what gets in our way is the same thing that gets in the way of these ladies later in the story. Fear. Verse 6, don't be alarmed, don't be afraid. Verse 8, trembling and bewildered, the women went out and they fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Now let me stop a second and say the disciples were no better. They were hiding out in the house somewhere. So it's not just the ladies I'm picking on. The disciples, they were afraid too, just not in the book of Mark, which is suspicious, let's say. But, so they're afraid. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. And then the story ends. Why are we afraid? I read a magazine article this week about fear and how the example in that article was that we as Christians worship at the altar of fear. Think about that for a second. the amount of things that are broadcast to us that we should be afraid of, or the amount of money that we spend, or the amount of time we spend thinking about things that scare us. Things in our minds that may or may not happen, all the what ifs, and we waste all this time on it. I thought about sharing a clip. I was telling Dean I had this perfect clip that I wanted to share, but whoever recorded it was playing some video game in the background, so it just ruined the whole clip. But so maybe I'll just tell you the story. Anybody seen the movie The Terminal with Tom Hanks? Stuck in the airport, and the agents, whatever, they're trying to get him out of this airport. And they said, if you'll just tell us that you're afraid of going back home, you can stay here. And he sits there, and they said, are you afraid to go back home? And he says, no. And they keep talking, and eventually he says, well, he's afraid of the wolf man. He's afraid of spiders. He's afraid of snakes. And he names off all these things that he's afraid of, but none of them matter to these agents. And to us, as Christians, I wonder, what are we afraid of? Are we afraid just like these women? Are we afraid? What if people don't listen to me? When I come back and I say that there's this angel there who said Jesus rose again, he's going to meet us in Galilee, what if they don't believe me? Or what if I'm wrong? What if I was just hallucinating? What if the soldiers come after me? What if the government gets upset at what's going on? All these things would have run through their minds when they were trembling and bewildered and fleeing, not telling anybody anything. What gets in our way of telling people about this resurrection and this change in our lives? Can we think about those fears? The same kind of fears. What if people don't listen to me? What if they don't believe me? What if they get upset with me? What if I'm wrong? You ever wondered about that? What if I'm wrong? All this time I've spent studying, learning, worshiping, what if I'm wrong? But I think the biggest fear that we have is, what if I'm right? What if all of this time that I've believed that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, all this time that I believed that he died, was buried, crucified, all this time that he said, I want you to change your life. What if I was right? And I have to look back at my life and think of all the things that I didn't do, all the ways I didn't change, all the times where I said, yes, I believe, but no, I'm not going to act that way. No, I'm not going to do what Jesus said. No, I'm not going to step out of my comfort zone and actually follow what God said. So I told Dean I was going to have a video clip in the middle, and I skipped that part of the message. So I'm going to come back to that, and then I'll just jump around, just like the book of Mark does, kind of jumping in between stories, keep it a little bit unexpected. But reading about the story of the crucifixion, there's some questions that come to my mind. Some of the questions are biological. I'm not going to get into that. How did this whole crucifixion work? And so we could get into that, but there's kids around and stuff like that. You can all read about it. But the question that came to my mind was, why did Jesus wait 3 days? He promised it, so that's a good logical answer. He was doing what he said. But why did they wait? Why did he promise, and why did he actually wait 3 days to rise again? You guys ever wondered that? Or maybe it's just me. Nobody else has wondered why he waited 3 days? Brandon is the only honest person. Okay, we got a couple of honest people here. Okay, so Dean's going to play a clip about why Jesus waited 3 days.
One dress of Pinman.
Israel is insane. Who even came up with that?
Jesus. Don't do this. Not with Jesus.
Seriously,
Jesus started the whole wait 3 days thing. He waited 3 days to come back to life. It was perfect. If he'd have only waited 1 day, a lot of people wouldn't have even heard that he died. It'd be all, hey, Jesus, what up? And Jesus would probably be like, what up? I died yesterday. And then they'd be all, you look pretty alive to me, dude. And then Jesus would have to explain how he was resurrected and how it was a miracle. And then the dude would be like, okay, whatever you say, bro.
Wow, ancient dialogue sounds so stilted now.
And they're not going to come back on a Saturday. Everybody's busy, doing chores, working the loom, trimming their beards, you know. He waits the exact right number of days. 3.
Okay, I promise. I'll wait 3 days. Just stop talking.
Yeah, plus it's Sunday, so everyone's in church already. They're all in there, oh no. Jesus is dead. Then bam, he bursts through the back door, runs up the aisle, everyone's totally psyched, and FYI, that's when he invented the high five. 3 days. We wait 3 days to call a woman because that's how long Jesus wants us to wait.
So that's
True story.
So there's as Kayla said, one guy's opinion why Jesus waited 3 days. But we all have a good laugh about it. But what if he actually did rise from the dead? We say that. We talk about it every Sunday. Most every communion meditation talks about Jesus dying, and we always want to make it clear that he rose again. If the story didn't end with Jesus dying on the cross, the story continues to the resurrection. In Mark, the story ends at verse 8. But people, I think, were unsatisfied with the ending. And God provides for us another ending. A lot like, in my opinion, that show that was on behind me. Some people think that had an unsatisfying ending. So they added a new ending to it. And maybe this chapter, verse 8, I think, should be unsatisfying to us. It shouldn't make us happy that the story ends with people being afraid and not telling anybody. But a lot of times that's where we let it end. All of us have had the opportunity to read this chapter. All of us have been able to close our eyes and see the angels talking to these women, telling them exactly what's going to happen. We've all seen the promises that Jesus makes. And we all have a chance to let it end right here with our fear and trembling. Or we have the opportunity to let the story continue into our lives and actually do something, actually share, actually speak out, actually change our life. Or we can be afraid. We can be bound by fear. We can worship at the altar of fear. We can let fear control us. Let fear determine what we do. That's what worship is. Worship is orienting your life around something. Worship is listening to someone. Worship is doing what that someone says. Worship is spending your time and your money focusing on this thing. A lot of us focus on this fear. This fear of stepping out and reaching out. This fear of what the world is going to look like, or what this person or that person is going to do, or what this group or that group or this country or that country will do. But God has not called us to live in fear. God has called us to live in the strength of God's own power that He has given us. We have nothing that we need to be afraid of because God is with us. Just like when Jesus promised, I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Therefore go, make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you, baptizing them, making disciples of them. That's what we would do if we really believed that Jesus was resurrected. Got a song that Dean's going to play for us, and then the band's going to come and close our service out. You can listen or you can sing if you'd like to. Pretty popular song. I think we've probably heard it before.